Mr. Chair, you can proceed. We are live and the stream is unmuted.
All right, 10-second countdown. All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Councillor Paul Ainsley. I am the chair of the General Government and Licensing Committee. The clerk has confirmed that we have quorum, so I would like to call meeting number 26 to order, and welcome to everybody and good morning. Today's meeting is being held with members of council and city staff participating by video conference. The public can continue to participate electronically and can watch the meeting streaming live on YouTube at youtube.com/Toronto City Council Live. These measures are in place to comply with public health guidelines and prevent the spread of COVID-19. The city clerk staff have connected all registered speakers to the meeting by audio. The list of speakers can be viewed online by visiting the General Government Licensing Committee's page at toronto.ca/council and clicking the speakers box for today's meeting at the top of the agenda. I ask for everyone's patience if we experience any delays or technical problems during the meeting. Members, the city clerk has provided all agenda materials on toronto.ca/council and on the clerk's meeting portal. Clerk's IT staff are also available for you remotely if you need help with any of your electronic devices. As part of each agenda item, I will ask members to raise their hand or unmute their microphone if they wish to speak to staff or to speak. I will then create a speakers list and will call on members when it's their turn to speak. When voting on an item or a motion, I ask that committee members ensure that they keep their video on and to raise their hand to indicate their vote. Members, I also want to remind you that you still must submit and approve your motions by email. Staff are available at gglc@toronto.ca to help with any motions you might have. For our land acknowledgement this morning, I would like to state that although we're in different locations and meeting remotely today, the committee would like to acknowledge the land we're meeting on is the traditional territories of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also would like to acknowledge Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. At this point, I'll ask if there's any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Seeing none, can I have a motion to confirm the minutes of our last meeting on September 15th, 2021? Speaker Nunziata, all in favor? Carried. Members will now go through the items on our agenda. Just gonna go Our first item is GL 26.1 Amendment to Non-Competitive Bridge Blanket Contract number 470-23833 to Kudlak-Baird for electrical maintenance and repair work at various city locations. Anybody like to hold this? I have somebody move the recommendations. Speaker Nunziata, all in favor? Carried. Number 2 is amendment to non-competitive bridge contract number 470-22860 to Peter Young Limited, operating as IPS for summer and winter ground maintenance at various city locations. Somebody like to move the recommendation? Speaker Nunziata, all in favor? That carries. Number 3, GL 26.3, contracts awarded under extended authority of the bid award panel during 2021. We have a motion to receive the report. Would somebody like to move receipt? Speaker Nunziata, all in favor? Carried. Number 4 is the Audit and Accountability Fund intake of 2 final reports. We have a recommendation for receipt of the reports. Somebody like to hold it? I have a motion to receive. Deputy Mayor Holiday, all in favor? Carried. Number 5 is a non-competitive contract with Esri Canada Limited for proprietary geographic information system software licenses. Deputy Mayor Holiday, ask you to move the report. Deputy Mayor Holiday is moving the report. Recommendations, all in favor? Carried. Number 6 is a review of open contracting global principles.
Mr. Chair, I
Yes.
apologize. I believe we've just received a speaker registration on that.
Okay.
So I believe we're just in the process of registering one speaker on that item.
Okay, I will hold number 6 down now.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Number 7, I'm going to hold. We have speakers. Number 8 is an application for approval to expropriate a portion of 5791 to 5793 Yonge Street and 5795 Yonge Street for public street purposes in stage 1. It's in Ward 18.
I'll move it.
Councillor Fillion is moving the recommendations in number 8. All in favor? Carried. Number 9 is the Wellington Destructor at 677 Wellington Street West, had Lessee and long-term lease. Somebody like to hold this or move the recommendations? I will move the recommendations. All in favor? Carried. Number 10, update on the Toronto Accessibility Design Guidelines. This is a report from the Executive Director. Somebody like to hold this or move the recommendations? Deputy Mayor Holiday is moving the recommendations. And number 10, all in favor? That carries. Number 11 is back to school vehicle for hire driver training. I'm holding that for speakers. Number 12 is tracking through open data, section 37 and section 45, community benefits, open 37. This is a request by me. I'm going to move the recommendations if nobody wants to hold it. All in favor? That carries. Number 13 is municipal licensing and standards 311 update, is asking for a report back to our November 30th meeting. I've made a request here. I'm going to move the recommendation. All in favor? And that carries. All right, we are going to go back to our first item with speakers, which is Matthew, number 6.
That is correct. Mr. Chair, I'll read it out. Bianca Wiley of Tech Reset Canada has phoned in.
Okay. Good morning, Bianca. I won't read you all the rules. I know you've deputed at this committee before. You have 5 minutes whenever you're ready, and thanks for being here this morning.
Super. Good morning. Can you hear me all right?
Perfectly.
Wonderful. Okay. Good morning, committee. Thanks for having me. I'm going to admit that I am here a little bit ad hoc, so forgive me in my sort of pandemic mode remarks. I'll definitely keep them short. So a couple of things. I think the first thing is I just want to say thank you, and that I'm so happy to see the idea of open contracting sort of beginning to move more formally through city process. It's super encouraging, and it's really nice because Toronto can become more part of like a global community that is looking at standards relating to procurement and contracting. And so, like, you know, top line message here is I'm really happy to see this happening. And I'm happy to see that the report is positive, you know, toward adopting and implementing these things. So that's the first thing. The second thing I want to say is that sometimes when people don't show up at committees like today, I've heard councillors, you know, probably everyone say, you know, no one showed up, everything must be fine. And I just want to flag for everyone here that procurement and technology procurement in particular, it's not a space where civil society and many of the residents in the city are super, myself included, you know, able to jump in and get involved because there's a lot of jargon, a lot of complexity. So I just want to say to everybody that just because things move through this committee, particularly as they pertain to procurement with no deputants, please don't mistake that silence for consent or for happiness with what is happening. I think especially in a pandemic, that's really, really important. So that's the second point. The third point I want to mention is that while this report is generally, positive on doing and implementing open contracting, it's really important that doing this stuff is supported by budget, that we consider things that are really critical, like governments publishing enough information about formation, award, execution of public contracts, which we don't see much of in that report, because this is about public monitoring, proper use of public resources, and that's what the global community looks to. So let's think about tightening that up. We really need to make sure governments do not sign NDAs, that's something critical, and that's, again, there's global discourse on that, which in the report we need to figure out because it's not there as far as I can see. And finally, we really have to say, if everything that the city's been doing so far is fine and we can just proceed, I have to look back at the recent procurement of Pay It and say that I don't agree. I think we can get into the details at another time, but I think we have to think about how we hold tight to these principles when we talk about how you don't have any directed procurement, why you make sure that things don't exercise preferential treatment. I've got a few more comments on lobbying. Because I'm so ad hoc, I'm not sure how much time I have left. Can someone let me know? Am I done?
It's just over 2 minutes, Bianca.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Councillor Inslee. I also just want to talk about lobbyists, okay? Lobbyists, we need to understand a little bit more specifically sometimes, like in the OECD, understanding the taxonomies, the types of lobbyists, linking them to any other information that might be relevant in terms of content or things they're working on, anything related to relationships outside, where the city participates in non-formal interactions, whether anything from LinkedIn to conferences. There's a lot of stuff going on where there is soft social relationships being formed with commercial vendors and suppliers. These things do not get caught by the lobbying registration as it stands today. So these are things, I'm trying to suggest some areas where it's great that we're looking at this stuff. How do we tighten it up? How do we commit to implementation that is funded? And the number one message here is the point of all of this stuff is so that we, the public, can be more involved in how the city is directing public funds and how we make sure that even some of these decisions that get made, should we even be purchasing things? Should we be investing in our unionized technology workforce to be doing our technology procurement? Maybe it shouldn't be outside. Maybe we should be thinking how we're growing capacity inside. So the reason that all of this stuff matters from a civil society perspective and from a resident perspective, show your work. We want to have good insight into how public funds are being spent and directed. We want to be part of that work. This is a new area. Super happy to see this happening, and we want to continue to be involved. But this is only as good as how the city implements it. If you just adopt these principles and then just keep on doing what you were doing before, we are not solving our problems. So thanks so much for your time today. And if you have any questions, I'm here. I have to admit, again, super ad hoc. And this is an area I am learning a lot about myself. So forgive me if I don't have them. But otherwise, thanks for your time.
Okay. Thank you, Bianca. Does anybody have any questions for Ms. Wiley? Seeing none. So Bianca, if I said to you, what are your top 3 things that you think we need out of this report? What would they be?
So I think we really need to get into this part about governments requiring timely and routine publication of enough information about the award, execution, performance, completion of public contracts so that the public can get involved. That's one, and that's major.
So how do you think we could do that better? Like, do you have any ideas that other jurisdictions are using or examples?
Well, I think a lot of this is more, no worries. I think a lot of this is more just showing your work, I think open government as a concept, which the city wants to do, is really talking about the follow, like, why is procurement happening? What was the trigger? Who are the parties involved? How did it let's tell the story from a narrative perspective, Let people know, why were we thinking about this? Which divisions were thinking about this? Why, And so I know that sounds less tight, like in terms of like your specific technical steps. But what I'm trying to say is for more of us to get engaged, I think we need to understand where are the city's pain points in terms of the procurements, right? Why are they happening? how could we think about these things? One idea that I think I've suggested in the digital infrastructure plan is to publish sort of like, here are the procurements coming down the pipe, so that you can give people a little more notice as to like something that's happening. But I think we can continue to riff on that. I don't want to take up too much more time, but I know that's loose. If there's more stuff I can share, I'll send some follow-ups. Again, I'm early in this too, so if there's other best practice, I'll share those with you. I think secondly, this part about making sure that, we're not like NDAs, we have to be careful with intangible assets like software, where communities know that companies throw around commercial reasons for secrecy, just like, it's like breathing. And so it becomes like, well, we can't talk about this because there's a commercial reason. And I think we have to challenge that. So my second point here is making sure that NDAs and anything that makes it difficult to engage with the procurement of something shouldn't be allowed. And if any company's coming to anybody with a requirement from a public official or staff to sign NDAs, that should be a red flag. We need to talk about it. That's the second one. And I think the last one really has to be around, before we decide we procure, can we build it ourselves? Like, how do we build a new process there? And I think that's a digital infrastructure area. But in the report, making sure, because as soon as we fall into procurement, we stop considering whether we can just make it ourselves. And in terms of long-term investments, we could be doing so much more efficient purchasing or building if we collaborate with other cities, if we collaborate globally, if we enforce open source standards. Some of this is digital infrastructure plan. But let's also talk about, adding to the report, how do we make sure we've checked that we shouldn't be building this? Why are we buying this in the first place? Is a really good question that this report, I think we always have to remember, we can also build stuff. And it's a better investment in our labor force. It's a better investment in control. And often it will be more efficient. We do not need any, I say this to everybody on this committee, the last 20 years of the government funneling money out to, whether it's the consulting management firms or a lot of these software vendors, this has been an absolute disaster for public value. So this is a business case. So let's think about why we're procuring. Can we build instead? How do we add that to the report? Those are my top three.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Bianca. I have a question for you from Deputy Mayor Holiday. Deputy Mayor Holiday, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for speaking to us, Ms. Wiley. Points 1 and 3, and I think you just said it in the last couple seconds, in my opinion, revolve around the concept of a business case. We don't always see those at the committee because they happen within the public service.
Right.
And, we get the output, right? Here's the report, take it or leave it.
Yep. Yep.
Have you seen any best practices at which a government, like an elected set of officials, would become involved at the business case stage? I mean, it's an interesting question in governance, right? And maybe there are practical thresholds. Do you have any thoughts or experiences or notes that you could share with us about that looking forward?
Yeah, and I just want to confirm, it's really heartening to hear you say this, because I think this as a governance issue, you've just said exactly what it is. This is a governance issue, and I think we're at this moment where a lot of this has become too depoliticized, and it's actually all happening before it gets to the political decision-making level. And so in terms of how to sort of instantiate some of these good practices into the public service, that's part of what this report is about. The digital infrastructure plan should help. But in terms of engaging on the political side earlier, I think this is where there's a lot of struggle right now with this. So I don't have the quick answer. I have stuff that I can send around policy, but I think what you're pointing at is the thing that I'm trying to figure out, because it kind of goes back to the beginning. I'm here just because I happened to get this great notification from a civic tech tool that reminded me that this meeting was on today. And it's really hard for us to engage with our elected officials about how to engage on this stuff. So I just, more so than have any good answer for you, I just want to confirm that what you're raising is exactly what I'm concerned about too. And so I think we need to rebalance where the political influence on this stuff is really applied, because it's arriving at every elected official as basically done. And what I can see is there's actually a slide of political power into the public service that's technically, from a governance perspective, not supposed to be happening. That power was never given formally, but now it's sort of happening. So I think I just want to end by saying no great answer, but you're right on the spot that I'd like to keep working on, together as a city.
So but there is one other concept I wanted to broach with you on it, though, is I don't know what the answer is, if there should even be political involvement at the business case stage. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. But the one thing that is important to me is making sure that the lines of trust are clear with the public service. I mean, I say that generically, not necessarily the Toronto Public Service, but we're talking about governments elected versus governments, public services in general. We do delegations of authority. We set parameters. We set rules. Maybe there's some room in council being clear with what the parameters are, so that the public service can do what they do, to do the analysis, to try to make recommendations on a business case and then follow through on them, given there's a set of limitations provided. I'd be curious if you ever hear about some of that governance. I'd be curious to hear about it. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's a good. Sorry, I'll make it quick, but just to say that's what we need to revisit, is where is that delegated authority happening? Because I think that some of it I think personally is real, obviously just me. There's a slide happening there. And to your point about governance, elected officials, and how this all, works transactionally, the industry knows from a lobbying perspective that when they go to elected officials first, that starts to create a bit of muck later on, right? So this entire ecosystem of who talks to, who, when, and what with a business case, I think we should revisit, because this is a captured space from the technology vendors. They know how to work the system in terms of the way it is depoliticized right now. So I think that's a public liability, and that's a vulnerability. So I think exploring where that line is again, and maybe we can think about a process to do exactly what you said. Like, of course there should be delegated authority. Let's make sure it is explicit, not happening because we haven't said this thing, right? Which is where I think we are right now. So thank you for that thought, and you're giving me some stuff to try to come back on and write a little bit about. So I'll follow up with everyone with anything related, case studies. I'll reach out to some of the community and see if I can, share some more stuff that might be helpful. But thank you so much, everybody, for the conversation and the questions.
Okay. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Holliday. Are there any other members of the committee that would like to question the Deputy? Seeing none, Ms. Wiley, thank you very much for your time and insights this morning. They're very much appreciated.
Yeah, thank you so much. Okay, have a good day, everyone.
You too.
Bye.
The committee will now bring it into this item back into committee. Does anyone have questions of staff on this item? Seeing none, speakers, we have a motion before us to receive this report. Can I have someone move receipt? Deputy Mayor Holliday's moving receipt. All in favor? And that carries. Our next item is GL 26.7 Community Space Tenancy Lease Agreement and Municipal Capital Facility Designation for Carefirst Seniors and Community Services Association at 705 Progress Avenue in units 36 to 37. And I do have a list of speakers. Just a moment and I will pull it up. Okay, our number 7, our first speaker is former City Councillor Glenn DeBearmaker. Mr. DeBearmaker, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
All right, you have 5 minutes. I know you're well aware of the process, so I'm not going to give you the outline. You have 5 minutes whenever you're ready.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair, and it's nice to be back at a committee. It's been 3 years since I left City Hall, and I can attest to all the sitting councillors that there is indeed life after politics, and I'm keeping very busy, including volunteering at the local autism center close to where I live, and that's why I'm deputing to you today. My hope today is to provide all of you with my perspective as a former councillor who's dealt with this property and the leases and the development potential of the site for the last 15 years, and in the hopes that it will help you and certainly help our local charities. So I'm here to support the recommendations of the staff report, but to also ask you to adopt another set of recommendations that would see that the charity that I volunteer with, the Autism Center that currently helps 400 children with special needs, gets additional space. as well as the 5 and 2 Food for All charity and the Council of Agencies serving South Asians. What happened on the site? So the 15 years that, while I was a councillor, every single time a charity approached the city and asked for help, we helped them. We provided, for 15 years that I was there, and I believe Councillor Duguid before me, any charity that needed help, we provided space for them. So during my tenure, with the help of people like Chris Brillinger and Joe Casali and Darren Somas and Russell Crooks, our Scarborough planner, we made sure that the Canadian Tamil Youth Development Centre, CanTide, was able, they were there before I even got elected, was able to stay and thrive and do all their outreach activities. The animal rescue people came looking for help. So myself and Animal Services helped the Feral Cat Recovery Center. The Autism Center that I'm a volunteer with now was granted space. And that space was 10,000 square feet of a unit that had been vacant for 15 years. So this is a city-owned building that had not been used for 15 years. It's now being used, thanks to the City of Toronto's wisdom, to help 400 special needs children. Same with the Warden Woods 24-hour respite center. That, I have to say, was quite a shock to the local community when we put in a shelter, but with some adjustments, it's a very successful center now. And same as something that started on my watch and is being done now under Councillor Ainsley's tenure is the Toronto Men's Shelter. So I would say that to you, that it's my belief that the city-owned buildings that are on city-owned land that have been purchased with city taxpayers' money should prioritize charities first. So we have many excellent businesses that are there. There are about 65 units on the site. But those units, for example, the international schools, the trucking companies, there's an internet guy there, it's like a flea market. Their businesses could be located across the street or down the street or in Lawrence or Shepherd or Eglinton or Kingston or Raleigh or Comstock. We have hundreds of acres of commercial and industrial locations they could locate at. But our charities can't locate usually at those other locations because the rent is too high. So this site is unique for these charities. It's usually their only alternative because of the below market rent policy. So I would encourage you that as businesses turn over, so I'm not asking you today to kick out any commercial businesses that have leases. My submission is that as businesses leave in their natural cycle and their natural turnover, that as space becomes available, you allow these charities to come in. And that's why I support the staff recommendation. One, the old Taylor Dance Studio became available, and then all of us charities, sort of like the Hunger Games, had to compete to see who would win. And Carefirst was selected by staff, and I support the staff recommendation. That's an amazing charity. I'm just asking that council also approve at this time our additional charities. I put in a number of other requests, one of them being that the reserve fund from 705 Progress, the net rents generated from 705 Progress go into a 705 reserve account. And I suggest that some of these funds be used to build a playground because there's 400 kids at the site and there's no playground right now. That's a permitted use for the reserve fund, as well as doing renovations. All of the charities here have to make sure that this is wheelchair accessible. So the cement ramps, the accessible washrooms and doors, all those renovations will not leave if the charity leaves. So the security system, the fire suppression system, the flooring, the walls, the ceilings, the HVAC system, those repairs, I think it's fair for the city to do those to help the charity. Finally, with 10 seconds left, I moved a motion 4 years ago that was adopted by council to ask staff to report back on a community hub. It hasn't been done so far. I just think with COVID and other emergencies, it hasn't been done. But I would ask council to request staff once again to report back on creating a community hub at 705 Progress. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Glenn. Are there any questions for the deputy? Seeing none, so Glenn, I do have a couple. So you said that in 2000, and I guess there's a bit of background. So this plaza, it's an industrial plaza, and it's half owned by the City of Toronto and half owned by the Toronto District School Board. They're hoping at some point to build a school, but it is an industrial unit. And in 2017, you asked for a community hub report or the potential of a community hub to be built here. You asked for a report back that was never done.
That's correct, and I think if that report had come forward, I would have predicted after sitting there in that seat for 15 years that staff probably would have said yes, because there is a need to help our local charities, and the local charities again help the poorest of the poor. The 5 and 2 Food for All charity takes food that restaurants and grocery stores are throwing in the garbage, rescues that food that is still good, prepares meals and delivers it to seniors' homes, TCHC buildings, like people who have high needs. So if that had been done, I don't think we would have had 5, 6, 7 charities competing against each other for one spot. I think staff would have recommended that we help all of the charities. So that hasn't been done yet. I hope that you would support that it comes back. And there's another motion that I put forward that I hope you request today, asking the TDSB and the city to work together to come up with a master plan for the area. It is jointly owned, so they have the TDSB has veto power over the city has veto power over the TDSB, so we have to work together. I think we can and should. And I think out of that 10-acre site, you could have 2 acres built with 2 condo towers, with a school in the base and a community hub in the base with affordable housing units there, and give taxpayers value for money, because the site next to this one, the building adjacent to where the school is supposed to go, the city approved for a 39-story condo on a site that has 3,000 condo units on it. So I think a joint exercise by the TDSB and the city reporting back to probably Scarborough Community Council or the Planning Committee would be a very good thing and actually help everybody.
Okay, excellent. All right, thank you, Glenn. I really appreciate your time this morning and glad to hear you're doing well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next deputant, also a former city councillor, Nathan Shan. Nathan, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Loud and clear. Go ahead. You have 5 minutes.
Awesome.
Welcome back to City Hall.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair, and good morning, councillors of the committee. Thank you for allowing me to debut today. I want to begin by actually thanking the staff who took us through the process, for keeping the process accountable and transparent and supporting organizations with all the questions. So thank you to all the staff at SDFA and all the other staff involved. I also want to, congratulate Carefirst. Strongly support of the decision. Carefirst is an amazing organization. In fact, last year and a half, I have had the chance to work with Carefirst to engage South Asian, particularly Tamil community around COVID, vaccination, COVID support, testing, and so on. And Carefirst has stepped up so well to do this work. So congratulations. I think the 705 Progress is a very special place for me. 22 years ago, I was a youth worker in that building for CanTIDE, Canadian Tamil Youth Development Center. Those who are old enough to remember the late 90s and early 2000 was a very difficult time for Tamil youth. We made it to the news a lot of time for the worst possibilities of deaths and quote unquote what was classified as gang violence. And we got this space for a youth-led organization, and today it's still running. And in fact, a few years later, the community was able to get that issue under control, and it's seen as a model of how youth development work could be done for not just Tamil community, but generally, and city has learned a lot from that. So, space is the greatest equalizer, but space is also one of the biggest discriminator in Scarborough. Scarborough itself has limited programming space, but there are larger organizations that tend to accumulate a lot of the resources, but smaller grassroots organizations continue to struggle. So I think this would be a great motion, and I just wanted to piggyback on what former Councillor Glenn DeBermaker talked about, to increase the amount of availability. We are always fighting for the small pie, and this time we said, this is not about fighting for that small piece of pie. This is about coming together as organizations and saying we need a bigger pie in this area. It is going to be the central hub of Scarborough. Scarborough has a large South Asian population, as you probably know. And South Asian communities have a lot of cultural and religious spaces and so on, but a kind of non-denominational community hub where all the different South Asian communities can scale up their resources together is not available for us. And that's why I think this is very promising under CASA, which has hundreds of organizations. CASA stands for Council of Agencies Serving South Asians. As an organizer with Tamil Civic Action, now we have over 300 young adults who are volunteers working on many issues, including recovery on stuff. We heard about SAC, South Asian Autism Awareness Center, amazing organization doing fabulous work. Punjabi Community Health Services has a very strong model to deal with gender-based violence in a culturally and linguistically sensitive manner, and they have a great senior program and mental health program that would be great value for Scarborough and can be replicated to other South Asian communities. South Asian Legal Clinic of Ontario, that is a legal aid clinic that is based in North York right now. As you know, legal support is pretty phenomenally important for South Asian communities. So CASA being there as a hub would be helpful to bring all these services into an area that is underserved. And I've recently learned a lot more about 5 and 2 food for all. So I think they're coming together. We are not going to be, divided in this. We think that there's enough space there that could be purposed to serve the community better. And right now, the support that South Asian communities receive in Scarborough is very band-aid. And if I were to talk to organizations, it's not mainly about funding. The community is very resourceful to get a lot of the other things. And if you were able to provide this small space to South Asian agencies, they would make the best out of it, as you can see from SAC and Canada as an example in that space. So I think the space modification and the motion to allow this will be a great way to kickstart a process of providing an important service. And having been on council, I know this is possible if there's a will from the staff as well as political leadership here, and totally doable and totally needed and totally justified, looking at a number of people that need our services as well. So thank you very much for allowing me to debut today. I feel it's very important that we get heard. I feel it's very important that this support gets provided as we build Scarborough Centre and expand into a hub with subway and other things. It'll be a perfectly accessible service for people, not just in Scarborough, but from around the city. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Nathan. Appreciate your time this morning. Does anybody have any questions of the deputy? Not seeing any. So Nathan, I just to reiterate, you are 100% and your organization 100% supportive of community hub being built here.
Yeah, definitely 100%.
Excellent. All right. Thank you very much for your time this morning. It's really appreciated.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Samia Hassan, Council of Agencies Serving South Asians, or CASA.
Everyone, thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing me to speak today. So
morning. You have 5 minutes whenever you're ready.
Thank you. I'm the Executive Director of the Council of Agencies Serving South Asians. I just like to take a few seconds to introduce our organizations for those who are not familiar with CASA. So we are a social justice agency serving South Asian communities living across the province of Ontario. Our member agencies are generally concentrated around the Greater Toronto area, more so in the city of Toronto. We do a lot of advocacy, research, capacity building, policy development, and training work. We are structured as an umbrella agency, as Nathan mentioned. We have currently over 120 member agencies, and I also have a written submission that was submitted to the committee, and you can take a look at the appendix of that submission to get a full list of the 125 current member agencies of CASA. Our direct beneficiaries of the work that we do are these member agencies that provide the frontline community services to South Asian communities, and our ultimate beneficiaries are the South Asian individuals and communities across the province. The focus of our work is on marginalized, underprivileged, and disenfranchised segments of the South Asian communities, including youth, women, seniors, those who are disabled, poverty-stricken, and the LGBTQ+ communities. Our mission and our mandate is to empower South Asians and act as a resource for capacity building, training, research, and information sharing for any matter of relevance to South Asian communities. Currently, we work under certain strategic priorities, which includes anti-racism, anti-oppression, poverty reduction, health equity, women empowerment, and supporting immigration and settlement. And as mentioned, we're also one of the applicants for the 705 Progress Space, along with the Punjabi Community Health Services, PCHS, and the South Asian Legal Aid Clinic of Ontario as subtenants to basically what we wanted to do was to use this space to start a South Asian community hub, and we wanted to provide various services to meet the needs of South Asians living in Toronto, and particularly Scarborough. And as you know, Scarborough has a vast population of racialized communities and also a large population of South Asians. And some of the services that we were hoping to provide in this space in partnership with organizations such as the Punjabi Community Health Services, the South Asian Legal Clinic of Ontario, and other member agencies like the Alliance of South Asian AIDS Prevention, the Canadian Pakistani Association of Scarborough, and many other agencies that work with us on an everyday basis. So some of these services include mental health and addiction support. So we know, and there's a lot of conversations and discussions around mental health right now, but there is a huge service gap for culturally appropriate mental health services, especially for South Asian communities. And there's a lot of data coming out of the pandemic to show that the South Asian communities have been disproportionately impacted in terms of their health and their mental health. So our member agencies provide counseling and addiction treatments for teenagers, for parents. There are certified counselors within our member agencies like PCHS that provide free counseling and treatment for at-risk youth and families. And as Nathan mentioned, PCHS also has really great gender-based violence programs and counseling services for both men and women. And that is culturally appropriate and adapted to work with South Asian communities. We're also hoping to provide programs for seniors. So again, PCHS has a really amazing Meals on Wheels program for the elderly. And during the course of the pandemic, we actually found that there is very, very few food security programs that are culturally appropriate. Recreational and cultural programming for youth, and legal aid, as I mentioned, for low-income South Asians, and leadership and community development programming. So we're hoping really to use the space in partnership with our member agencies to provide services for South Asians in Scarborough and surrounding areas. And we are hoping to use this space as a one-stop location for information, for community health services, for social innovation, for community collaboration, for cross-cultural knowledge exchange. So there are many recommendations that are in our written submission, which also includes approving additional space whenever it becomes available to agencies like 5 and 2 Food for All Charity, for CASA, and for South Asian Autism Awareness Center, which is also a member organization of CASA, along with CanTide, which is already located at 705 Progress. So I urge council here today to help us. I know we have the will at City Council to help charities, and especially in the context of the pandemic, we've seen our communities really suffering, and so this space will really allow us to provide the much needed services that are needed for Scarborough residents. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Samia. Does anybody have any questions from the committee? Any questions for Ms. Hassan? Seeing none, thank you very much, Ms. Hassan. I really appreciate your time this morning.
Thank you.
The next applicant is Baldev Muda from the Punjabi Community Health Services of Greater Toronto Area, or PCHS.
Mr. Chair, I'm advised that Baldev is not yet connected. Maybe we can cycle back to that person. Okay,
not a problem. Our next applicant is Ms. Geeta Murthy of the South Asian Autism Awareness Center. Geeta, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Good morning. You have 5 minutes whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving the opportunity for me to speak about it. I'm the founder and executive director of SAC Autism Center. And right now we are at 705 Progress Avenue, Unit 63. And this actually happened because thanks to the mayor and all the councillors who supported us in the last 3 years. So we serve about 400 children and adults on the autism spectrum and provide services to children from the ages of 2 to the adults who are seeking employment. Due to COVID, our wait lists have grown from 150 and now it's almost 400 children and the families are waiting to get the services. So they're very desperate to get the service, and we don't have enough space to provide them the service. And that's why we are requesting for more space. So just to give an introduction of because when you have autism, when they have been diagnosed with autism, early intervention is the key. And if they don't get it between the ages of 18 months to 3 years or 4 years, and they have the time has gone and the improvement we see during that period of time is wasted now. So this is why, we really would like to serve the children, those who have been diagnosed within the past 1 year or 2 years time, and to provide them the service. So we have got 400 children are waiting on the wait list. So what's happening is what are the programs we provide? It's we have got from the starting to as soon as they get the diagnosis. So we have got evidence-based therapies like applied behavior analysis, speech and language therapy, then occupational therapy, and the family empowerment. Because these families, as soon as they get the diagnosis, they are going through many struggles, and they have got a lot of challenges, and they are going through mental health issues as well. So we provide mental health services for these families. And also for adults, those who have transitioning out of school, and they have to, they need that daily living skills to see how they can be in the community later on. So we are providing adult services. It's called the Living and Learning Program. And also we are training for employment. Right now we are training about 22 adults on the spectrum to be employable in the future. So for this, we really need more space than what we have right now. I know we have got about almost 11,000 square foot space, and thanks to all the counselors who supported us, but we need additional space for this. And along with 5 and 2 charities, CASA and SAC, I think we can create a better a hub here at 705 Progress.
Thank you, Geeta. Questions of the deputy? Seeing none. So, sorry, Geeta, it's Councillor Ainsley. How many children did you say are on your waiting list?
So it's around 400 children. So we are serving about almost 400 children right now, but we are doing a lot of in-person as well as virtual sessions because of COVID too. But then, we have another 400, at least 400 on the wait list.
So you're serving 400 and you've got 400 on your waiting list. So you need almost double your space.
That's right.
So Community Hub would be a very welcome benefit, not only to you, but many of the other organizations.
That's right, yes.
Yeah, and I know that you applied for space in 36 and 37. There's limited space in the community, so it was almost like nonprofit organizations butting heads against each other, I guess would be the best way to describe it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right. Well, we're going to do our best to get that fixed today, Geeta, and make some progress. I want to thank you for all the work that you're doing in my ward.
Thank you so much, Councillor.
And for our community at large.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next deputy is Denise Indira Steele with 5 and 2 Food for All.
Good morning.
Ms. Steele here? Ms. Steele, you have 5 minutes whenever you're ready.
Thank you so much, Chairman of the Board, for allowing us an opportunity to speak to you all. First of all, I'd like to introduce myself, Denise Steele, and I'm speaking on behalf of Seema David, who is the executive founder and director of 5 and 2. Just to give you a little bit of an introduction on who we are at 5 and 2. 5 and 2 is almost like a little community hub in itself. There are many programs that we do provide the community in order to combat food insecurity, fight poverty, and everything associated around those challenges. At 5 and 2, we offer several programs. There's the kitchen program where we provide a meal for all of those who need it. We actually partner with local agencies in order to provide a warm meal to clients that are actually waiting to visit the marketplace in food banks, for drop-in centers for seniors buildings, We have 13 different partnerships right now. We also have a free food pantry, and the model of the free food pantry is a little bit different than you would see in a food bank. With our model, it's more of a dignified approach to allowing clients within the community to come in and to have access to the food that we would be able to supply them. So they would book an appointment online through an agency, and then they would be able to come in and shop our marketplace through their own designated time slot. So again, they would avoid long lineups and be able to shop the marketplace during their own time. So we also have a community garden space, and throughout the summer, it's been such a wonderful thing to be able to watch the garden grow and have it's more of a community engagement project where neighbors can come in and help grow. We can teach them how to grow small gardens even from their own window space. Through the garden, we were able to supply the food pantry with fresh homegrown herbs and vegetables. So there's a lot that's happening at 5 and 2. Right now, the challenge that we face is that as of the end of this year, we will no longer have a space. Just to back up a bit, we are one of the organizations that, as Councillor Ainsley put it, and I hate to say this, but butting heads, with other not-for-profits, just so that we could secure this one space. But that was the situation that we were in, and we are currently still in. And while we do support the decision that was made in order to award the space to the current, I want to say, winners of the space, we are still left in a very difficult situation in that at the end of this year, we no longer have space to run our programs. And so I support everything that former Councillor Glenda Boermaker has said, and even with the Samia from Cassia and Gita from SAC, I support everything that they're saying. I fully request the support and help to obtain below market rents at 705. We would love to be able to do that in order to see the services that we provide the community move forward and continue. Because at this point, I really don't know what we will be doing once the year end comes.
Thank you, Ms. Steele. Questions of the deputant? Seeing none, so Ms. Steele, so I took over this area of the ward in 2018, and I think since then 5 and 2 has moved twice. You were in the Church on Markham Road, you're currently in an industrial unit on Ellesmere, and now you've outgrown that, I understand.
Yes. If I can just speak to that, yes, we did originally start off at the church next door at 1250 Markham Road, and now we are in an industrial unit. We ended up having to take over another unit in the same at 2050 Ellesmere. The reason being, this was in response to COVID. We have not shut down one day since COVID has happened. We've been open 7 days a week. The whole issue of food insecurity, although it was always there, I feel that it was highlighted even more during the pandemic because it really did bring out additional neighbors and individuals that were isolated and having a difficult time just getting a hold of nutritionally dense food. And so we ended up taking over another unit so that we could keep our volunteers and staff as distanced as possible so that we can continue to provide these services. The free food pantry was one of the services that we ended up taking over, starting in the new space.
And the new space that you took over, just for members of the committee so they understand what 5 and 2 has to go through. If it's, December, January, February, when it's freezing cold and you're making food on one side of the building, you actually have to walk out about 50 yards, go around a corner, get your supplies, and then walk them back outside. It's not like going down a hallway in a building. You actually go from one building to another to try and cook meals.
That's right. We were hoping to be able to take over space that would give us direct access, but that wasn't the case. We had to take what was available. And yes, we do, especially in the winter, it's very difficult. You can imagine heavy pots of soups or stews or just, anything, any cooked food coming down a set of stairs, going around the building itself during icy conditions. Most of the work that's done, Councillor Inslee, at our facility is done by volunteers, a lot of seniors, and we're doing it at times in conditions that are not the safest. And yes, we do have to come around the corner during any kind of inclement weather to deliver the food to the other side, to get it either to the clients of the pantry or other neighborhood clients that are picking up the goods that we're providing.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time this morning. Thank you very much for speaking with us. And just as the local city councillor, please keep up the great work. It's amazing what you're doing for my community.
Thank you, Councillor Easy.
Okay. That was the last registered deputant on this item. We're now going to bring it into committee. Are there any questions of staff?
Sorry, Mr. Chair. There was one additional. There was a speaker that we skipped over. I believe they have just connected, Baldev.
Oh, okay. All right.
We were just waiting for them. We've noticed that they've connected. We're just waiting for them to connect their mic. So if they can hear us, they should connect their mic and it would be their turn to speak.
Valda Muta, can you hear us? Valda Muta? Valda Muta, can you hear us? Valda, call anyone last time. I'm not getting anything, Matthew. Okay, we're going to move on to questions of staff, and we'll see if we can come back to Valda. Deputy Mayor Holliday, I saw your hand first.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'm just trying to put together everything I heard today. So I think we heard from 4 charities, and there's a 5th listed in the report. So my question to staff is, how does the mix of units get determined at 705 Progress Avenue? Because from what I can gather, there's a whole bunch of commercial units, and some of them are allocated to below market rent organizations. We've got one of them before us today. And then we heard from 4 other charities saying, like there's a desire for more. So how does the City of Toronto figure out that split within Progress Avenue, 705 Progress Avenue?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'll take that question, Deputy Mayor Holliday. Through you, Mr. Chair. We don't look at it from the standpoint of a split at 705. We different as an internal service provider of real estate, a variety of internal clients will come to us with a variety of needs, and it's our job to find space within the respective community. So whether it's 705 or different locations, and based on that need, then SDFA will run its REOI process to actually select a community group. So we don't have an allocation per se for 705. It's really we don't base it on that. It's based on need and where we can actually find available space.
Okay, so if there's a desire to increase the number of charities in this location, who comes forward as your client to you to say, I shouldn't even say this location, in the area, I guess. If there's a need to increase the number of below market rent locations for charities in the area, and we heard from some of them today, who comes to you, to real estate, to say, find a space?
They'll come through a variety of different avenues. It could come from a counselor's office. It could come from economic development and culture. It could come from SDFA. And based on their requirements, we'll look for either city space or commercial space, depending on the client and whether or not they have the wherefore to cover that cost. So,
okay, because in this case, there's an opportunity cost to lease the unit. I think it was $200 and something thousand. You have to square that up in your budget. And I understand why we do that, right? We want to find these spaces for these community agencies to operate. How does that approval process work? So, over time, I guess from what I heard today that there's going to be an increase in the number of below market rent at this location. So how do you square all that up?
So again, from a commercial, so in this case, it's unique because the property is co-owned with Toronto District School Board. So we would need to get approval if there were any additional, commercial space tenancies or below market rent requirements for there. But the groups would actually go through, so we would determine what the space is and what the cost of the space is. We would provide that to SDFA, and they would go through their request expression of interest to select organizations, and they would determine whether or not, based on the inputs we provided them, and whether or not those organizations can actually cover those costs. But I'd have to ask SDFA to actually walk you through the process.
I'll do that. I'll turn my question to SDFA. Help me understand. We heard from some really great charities with some really great ideas and cases for work that they want to do. How does now SDFA process those needs? And how does one select who goes into the next piece of space that becomes available? I guess first the city has to make the decision, do you rent it to a market tenant or do you rent it to a below market tenant? So how does that process work? I noticed some of the suggested motions that were put in, the correspondence to the committee, like even goes out and spells out the names of the charities. But, I don't know. I heard really good things today, but I don't know who else is out there. So help me understand as a counselor how I would square up those needs, or how those needs will get squared up in time, because it's been clearly demonstrated today.
Okay, I'll have to ask Denise Campbell from SDFA to actually answer that question on the community needs.
Thanks, Pat, and thanks, Councillor Holiday, for the question. So we have a process called the Community Space Tenancy Policy that is council approved, that we go through every time there is an individual vacancy that has come up in a building. And it's the process that was used to select from the set of agencies that expressed an interest for this particular vacancy. So that includes identifying the types of what the space is, what the costs are, what the kinds of community needs are, and then agencies fill out an application process, which is then reviewed by a panel to individually scored, similar to an RFP, but much more community friendly. And then an applicant is selected as the agency to come forward to committee and have committee and council approval for the tenancy. I will say though that we also have processes where multiple agencies have come together and there is community need in order to create a community hub. Those, and I think that's a slightly different process than one where we're just trying to fill one vacancy. What we've heard today from many of the deputants is the desire for a community hub. I think the challenge is to put a community hub in this space where the city doesn't just own the space. The TDSB is part of ownership, and there are also commercial tenants there as well. That makes it a little bit more complex, but I would say we try our very best to try to meet the needs of as many agencies as possible. We just don't always have the vacancies or the city-owned buildings. And in some cases, council approves our ability to go and buy buildings, working with Pat's team in real estate, or to rent them in order to create a more whole-scale community hub.
Mr. Chair, I know I'm out of time, but I wondered if I could ask one more question, or if you could allow me a second round. It's a technical question about the CST.
Sure. Last question.
Mr. Chair, and to my colleague committee members, I know the CST talks about the city can prescribe priorities or areas of focus with respect to what could go into a request for expression of interest. Can City Council articulate those types of things? So, could City Council say, hey, we'd really like to see something related to food in this area or in your next REOI, without getting right into the weeds about what it is, but we could start to flavor what it is that we're looking for. And I wondered if you could offer comment on that. I mean, I'm sure SDFA does that, right? They kind of bring some degree of focus to the REOI, but could council add our thoughts?
So the short answer, Councillor, is yes. The community space tenancy is a policy of City Council, approved by City Council. So if it's City Council's will to amend that policy or give us particular direction for a site using the policy, then that can be a council direction to SDFA, in which then we will proceed with.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Holiday. Speaker Nunziata, I saw your hand.
Thank you. So I have a few questions. So Denise, as far as the community hub, it's similar to the one that I have in my ward, 1652 Kiel Street, where we have all the charities, agencies in one building that the city owns.
So, Councillor Nunziata, ideally, I mean, listening to the deputants, I think that's the vision that they have, is that it becomes like 1652 Kiel. The difference with 1652 Kiel, and you know that's longstanding, you fought for it, and it's working well for the community. The differences here is 1652 Kiel, it's one building that the city owns. So with council direction, we can do whatever we like on that site. This is a different situation because the city is a part owner with the TDSB. So we need their consent, and Pat can speak far more clearly on that for whatever we do with it in the future. And I think the second complication is that, and my colleague Paul Zuliani from planning is here as well. There is some restrictions, I understand, from a planning perspective as to what that site is used for and designated for from a planning. So 1652 Kiel didn't have these complexities, and it means that we can't just do what we want to do to meet community service needs. We have to be able to understand those complexities and try to either negotiate our way out or find an alternative.
Right. But that's what the agencies and what we've heard today is that's what they're asking for, is a similar model that we have at 1652 Kiel Street. My second question, what is the contribution from the school boards?
That?
Yeah. Well, what are they doing? Are they...
So this is, sorry, go ahead, Councillor.
No,
They provide angst.
Go ahead, Pat.
Mr. Chair.
Sorry,
So
is my microphone on? My apologies.
My apologies as well. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councilor Nunziata. So the property is co-owned by us, by the city and TDSB. We have an operating agreement. CREM actually manages the property as a property management. So we collect all the rents, pay all the bills, and then the net distribution, we equally split those funds. And the portion that the city gets actually goes into a reserve fund. So even though they're half owner, we actually manage the property.
Oh, okay. So we pay for the cost of the management and then they collect the revenue.
No, we collect the revenue. We pay whatever expenses, and then whatever left, we split 50-50, and the portion of the city, okay. And the portion of the city goes into a reserve fund.
Well, maybe they can do a lot more than what they're doing. So my second, so it's my understanding, and look at the email from Glenda Bearmaker. So there has been nine applications that were received, and we're accommodating only one out of the 9, correct? So because you only have space for one, is that because I don't know the area, so I don't know the building. So you're only accommodating one? See?
I can't speak to the accommodation. I can speak to the 705 is fully tenanted, Councilor Nunziata, at this time.
Oh, okay. And you received 9 applications. So what they're asking is why was only 9 recommended and not additional, correct?
So I can take that through the chair. So those 9 were recommended because they met the first set of criteria. Then we take them into selection committee, and choose the one that won the competition.
Okay.
Because there is only one space.
Oh, okay.
So that's the process.
Okay, so there's only one space and you had 9 applications. So you could really only accommodate one space, correct?
That is correct.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Speaker Nunziata. Other questions of staff? Seeing none, so we will move on to speakers. Do I have any speakers on this item? Seeing none, so I will speak since this is in my ward, and I do have a motion that I would like to move. And I have to apologize, the motion is in 10 parts. But to speak to the motion, so what this motion is doing is try to cover off a lot of the concerns that were heard today. And as a bit of background, and Speaker Nunziata said she's not familiar with this piece of property. So 705 Progress, it's jointly owned by the City of Toronto and the Toronto District School Board, which is a partnership which I found very unique when I took over this area. When I was elected to represent this area in 2018, I've never seen anything like this before. The property in question currently is what we call in Scarborough Strip Plaza, an industrial strip plaza. Part of it is L-shaped. The second part within the L is a rectangular shaped building. Staff said it's fully occupied. The Southeast Asian Autism Awareness Center, as you heard, looks after 400 clients. They have another 400 clients on a waiting list. Warden Woods operates a respite center in part of it. In the back of it, we have a shelter operating as we revitalize the George Street homeless shelter for men. It's been a frustrating process, and I want to thank staff for all the work that they've done. But what's become very glaringly clear during this process is that there's a lack of space in Eastern Scarborough for nonprofit organizations that do a lot to serve this community. You heard from 2 former city councilors, Glenda Bearmaker and Ethan Shand, that are involved with 2 of them. I had 9 organizations apply for 1 space in 705 Progress. And it's not just because of the city offers a below market rent. As I said, there's a lack of space in Eastern Scarborough. Nonprofits try to operate within close range of each other because there's a lot of crossover and collaboration. So one of the things I'm asking for is staff under the community tenant policy is to prioritize which potential tenants go into this building in the future as vacancies occur. I'm asking for a playground to be built using the monies out of a reserve fund. I'm asking for much better collaboration with the Toronto District School Board. When this entire process started, I had one nonprofit trying to move into the space. I had a dance organization, which I'm not going to mention by name, but they got their members all very riled up trying to influence who goes into this space. And, as a city councilor with 5 neighborhood improvement areas in my ward, a space like this, I think really should be prioritized for nonprofit organizations. One of them, 5 and 2 Kitchens, supplies 3,000 meals a week to across those neighborhood improvement areas. If I didn't have 5 and 2 Kitchens operating, providing those meals, the food banks in my ward would be completely overwhelmed. And if 5 and 2 falters, there's nowhere to put them. There's no space. The City of Toronto doesn't have a backup plan. Food banks really aren't a priority for us. It's the provincial government, but that's a conversation I think we can save for another day. But even getting this process going, I needed the approval of the local school trustee. I needed bureaucratic approval from the Toronto District School Board, which was not easy to come by. I want to thank the school trustees, Akir Patel, for all the work that he did getting things moving on the Toronto District School Board. This is a site within walking distance of the new Scarborough subway extension, and schools in the area, there's not a lot of room. They talk about building schools with condominiums or buildings on top of them. The Catholic School Board needs space in this area, and that's a conversation that they're going to have with the developer. CREM, once again, they've been great assisting in finding space for these nonprofits. But as I said, space is hard to come by. And if it is space available, it's a very hard market rent because, once again, that space is very hard to come by. So I'm moving this motion. There's a lot of different parts to it, but I think there's a lot of potential here to accommodate all of the nonprofits, to have a playground put in, and to get working in a positive manner with the Toronto District School Board. So I ask members on the committee for support of my motions. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, on a point of order, could we just get the motion up? I didn't even get a chance to read it. I got the first four. Yeah, it's long. I get it.
Yep, not a problem.
And I did have a question for you, but if Matthew could scroll a little bit and get us past number 4, because that was where it was up for a while. I'd love to see 5, 6, 7, 8.
Mr. Chair, if I can advise the committee as well, the motion, text of the motion is available on CMP on the item, and it's also available on the public site on the item as well.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. Sorry, Matthew. Deputy Mayor Holiday, there's a 9 and 10 as well.
Yep.
And just for some clarity, Deputy Mayor Holiday, so the Pat Matoso, what the comments he made earlier, so the rent from the units, they help cover the costs. They're split between the Toronto District School Board, and then our monies are put into a reserve fund that's specific for the money has to be used on the site.
So, Mr. Chair, I did have a question for you of the motion, and it's really speaking to the intent of it. Number 1 really spells out a couple of agencies. Is the intent to amend the community space tenancy policy and direct it towards these two, these three? I see there's some language in there assuming eligibility, but we know that there's a bit more of an open process on that. Could you just be clear with me on that?
Yeah, so as I said in my comments, the space for nonprofits in my community is very limited. They all desire some type of community hub. And, I'm asking for these nonprofits to be prioritized for access into this plaza based on their eligibility under the community tenant policy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. May I speak really briefly on it once you're done?
Sorry, there are other questions? Speaker Nunziata?
Part of your motion and the request is, as you mentioned, that there would be development and there's a plan to build a new school and condo towers, correct? On that site?
Well, so currently the property is half owned by the Public School Board. I've represented since 2018. They often talk about, there's been some talk that, one day eventually they will build a school. There's a lot of development in the area. But I think, as the needs increase and progress avenues on a bus route, I think there might be an opportunity there to build condominiums on a podium and include affordable housing, which will help defer costs for the school board and also meet our affordable housing needs.
So there's an opportunity in the future if they proceed with that, that there would be funding for community benefits in Section 37 to actually have a community hub and the playground, and correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions by the committee? Seeing none, Deputy Mayor Holiday, you wanted to speak?
I did. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I heard the charities come forward today, and we heard several of them. In fact, we heard from, I think it was 4. I appreciate the needs, and they have expressed really good cases for what they want to do, and good for them to come out and advocate. And I'm just scrolling through the motion, that's why I'm looking down. But I do have some concerns with part 1, which really directs the community space to some named agencies. And like, I don't fault you, Mr. Chair. I mean, this is your ward, and you're trying to create something here. But this is a matter of conscience and transparency for me. And so I'm going to ask if I can vote against that. And I don't want it to be a signal that I disagree or have a lesser value for these charities. I think they're great from what I hear. But there is a concept in that community space tenancy policy that allows for openness and transparency on it. And I know there was 9 applicants that came up in the questions. So I don't know what the other 4 or 5, if that's what they'll think of this. So, I'm going to vote for the rest. I mean, I hope all of this works out well, and I really understand and appreciate that there's a direction towards creating a hub. And I think that's a big and complex journey, but a very, very important one. But that one particular piece there about the community space tenancy policy is something I just wanted to draw a circle around because it worries me. And, it's sort of a vote in protest, just to say I think we should just be careful with these sorts of things. But I hope you understand the rationale for my comment and the reason for my vote. And I really wish everyone that, whatever comes out of this process, everyone's success in what they do. So thank you. And Matthew, if you caught that comment, if it's okay, item 1 and 2, I'd like to vote separately on and be recorded. I think they work together.
Matthew?
Mr. Chair, so are we ready to vote on your motion now? Okay, so we'll display the motion. Okay, so I think I would advise, looking at the motion, I believe parts 1 through 7 all relate to part 1 above. If I understand that correctly. So each of those include, I believe they all relate to part 1, if I'm not mistaken. So I think if you're voting against part 1 and 2, if you're voting against part 1, and that fails, I believe that 2 through 7 there, because part 1 would fail, become redundant.
Okay.
So perhaps it would be a vote, on parts 1 through 7, part 1 only, something along those lines.
All right, we will follow your advice.
Mr. Chair.
Councillor Mansis?
Can I just ask a question just to be able to understand more clearly for portion number 1 of the motion? Is there space available right now, or is there no vacant space available at 705? And we're looking at in the future to provide space for these charities.
Yeah, so currently there's 1 space available. And then what I'm saying to staff is that these charities be prioritized for future space as following under the community tenant support policy.
So 1 space is available, is going to start to be available. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're voting on clauses 1 to 7.
Yes.
Sorry, did you want to record a vote, Councillor Holiday? or you just want to be recorded in the negative? I guess.
Whatever is most efficient, Mr. Chair. Sorry, my microphone keys got a bit of a lag, so my apologies for the delay in responding.
That's okay. So Matthew, do you want a recorded vote then, or?
Yes, yes, we should take a recorded vote. So this is a recorded vote on motion 1 by Councillor Anthony, parts 1 through 7.
Okay.
So all those
in favor?
Councillor Ainsley, Speaker Nunziata, Councillor Matlow, Councillor Fillion.
Opposed?
Sorry, Councillor Mantis. I can't actually see Councillor Mantis's. Councillor Mantis, did you vote?
In the affirmative.
Thank you very much, Councillor. And all opposed. And Councillor Deputy Mayor Holliday is opposed. Mr. Chair, that is 5-1, so that motion parts 1 to 7 carry. You can vote on the balance as well.
Okay, all in favor of the balance?
Okay, and that carries.
Carries. And that's unanimous. Okay, thank you very much, everyone.
And then we still need, so that is your motion, we'll still need to vote on the item as amended, Mr. Chair.
Item is amended, all in favor? Councillor Fillion? Item is amended, all in favor, and that carries unanimously. Okay, thank you, everyone. Our next item is GL 26.11, back to school, vehicle for hire driver training. Our first deputant is Ms. Christine Hubbard. Ms. Hubbard, are you available?
Yep, I'm here. Can you hear me?
All right, you have 5 minutes whenever you're ready.
I was wondering if I'd be able to turn on my camera. Is that allowed?
Yes, it is. Sorry.
No, I'm sorry. Spoke speaking is by audio only, Mr. Chair.
Oh.
It's by audio only.
Okay, I did hear that. I just thought I had seen a previous deputant on camera. I had a prop today for the first time, so.
Sorry.
That's okay. Thank you for, good morning, and thank you for letting me have this time. I am sitting in front of a binder with hundreds and hundreds of pages of City of Toronto training documents that were used to provide training to all vehicle for hire drivers in the city. And I would suggest that this was updated as late as 2015. And I obtained this binder on the day that training, unfortunately, was canceled in this city, and dozens of students were dismissed from classrooms, literally at the training center. And I just want to read the mission statement that's in this binder, and it says, Municipal Licensing and Standards Division's mission is to enhance the quality of life in the City of Toronto by ensuring public safety, community integrity, consumer protection, and responsible business activities. And this is training that has been built and delivered over decades. It includes a defensive driving component, sharing the road with cyclists, and I'm talking about hundreds of pages. I suppose it's similar to the mission statement of the TTC, whose drivers undergo extensive training. But for some reason, the vehicle for hire industry, taxis, Uber, Lyft, for those who are not aware of who we're talking about, this one seems to be the only one being moved by regulators in the wrong direction when it comes to keeping people safe in this city. The bar has been so significantly lowered. I've worked in the ground transportation industry for close to 30 years. Every decision we make at BEC is weighed specifically against the impacts those decisions will have on the safety of our communities, drivers, and Torontonians accessing our service. And I can't help but wonder what the purpose of a licensing body is, if not to keep people safe. Training comes at no cost to taxpayers. It only comes with the benefits associated with people who are knowledgeable in providing professional service to members of our disabled community, our seniors, our children, families, and how these drivers interact with other road users, cycling infrastructure, and important points of interest. The only cost to requiring training lays in the hands of those who want to profit from the work. This comes at no cost to this city. But there is a huge cost to this city for not requiring this training. It results in the degradation of safety for our communities on our streets. injury, death, property damage, insurance claims. I mean, the list goes on. All of these risks are reduced with training, and that was the mandate, or is the mandate, of this branch of government. Using our streets, whether as a pedestrian or cyclist or vehicle driver, you know, everyone is a vulnerable person, but the ones behind the wheel have the greatest responsibility, and I don't think anyone can argue that. Tons of steel being operated on busy streets, approaching curbside, responding to communication devices, attending to strangers in the back seat, assisting with mobility devices, navigating traffic and congestion. You know, that is the nightmare we're living in the city right now. But they're making money doing those things, and they should be trained. The training program that was delivered through the city, they said, would improve your knowledge of passenger care, as well as ambulatory care and accessible equipment knowledge. You know, right now, staff are requiring training and refresher training for wheelchair accessible services, when this service, while extremely important, represents only a small fraction, under 2% of the vehicle for hire service being offered, while more than 100,000 vehicle for hire drivers have been allowed to hit our streets with zero training. What we know in our business is that people who require extra care, seniors, children, members of the disabled community, these people actually represent probably 50% of the service being provided across the board, whether you're talking about Uber, Lyft, taxi, limo. I just don't understand why their safety isn't as important as the safety of people who use wheelchairs. You know, anyone in the backseat of a vehicle being driven by a stranger is vulnerable. Anyone providing the service and care that is expected of a professional driver should be aware and appropriately trained. And this is what people believe in our city. Torontonians believe that, you know, this is attached to the permission that has been granted to someone allowed to cruise our streets. And right now we're facing a crisis. The training requirement we're talking about today was voted on by council in 2019 in response to multiple fatalities caused by ride-hail drivers who are licensed without training. We're calling for this training to be implemented before any other drivers are licensed. This is what our community wants to see. You know, look online today after what we've seen on our streets in the last 48 hours. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hubbard. I'll take it back to committee. Does anybody have any questions of the deputy? Seeing none, thank you, Ms. Hubbard. I appreciate your time this morning and your input.
Thanks so much.
Our next deputy is Jana Erickson from Centennial College.
Hi, my name is Jana Erickson. Can everyone hear me okay?
We can. You have 5 minutes whenever you're ready.
Perfect. Well, thanks for having me. I'm the chair of part-time learning and corporate training for Centennial College. We've been facilitating the training now for both taxi and vehicle for hire drivers, well, any vehicle for hire drivers now, for probably just over 5 years, and have put through over 2,000 drivers. So I really wanted to speak today a little bit on the training that is available and has been available since this training stopped, and just to give you a little bit of a background on sort of what's covered and what we've learned, not only from the community, but also from the drivers and the students taking the course as well. So as Christine mentioned, there was a very in-depth 3-week driving program that was mandated by the city. And after reviewing this very in-depth training, we were able to create sort of a comprehensive yet compressed training program that addresses not only customer service, but accessibility and human rights legislation, but more importantly, possibly is that defensive driving component. And our course currently is a 25-hour commitment to the training. But what's interesting is the course section, which is defensive driving, which makes up about a quarter of the course. It's important to mention that when I went back to review the program, and we were looking at all the students we put through and following up on their feedback, we noticed that when students did fail the course, over 96% of the time, the reason they failed the course was because of that in-car component. And I think that's really telling when we look at, you know, where we see it as important for knowledge base as we share this. Prior to COVID, Centennial developed a very comprehensive online program in hopes that we'd be able to reach out to way more drivers as the training was possibly going forward. However, even looking at that, we decided that we would move our online training into a hybrid component that we still felt that an in-car assessment for all drivers was really important so that we can assess their driving awareness and their ability. And a great deal of research went in and developed this. And in doing so, we realized that there's many companies.
Janet Chapman here. Can I help you?
Hello? I'm sorry. Are you still able to hear me? Okay, somebody just opened it. That's good.
We can hear you.
Okay, sorry. And when we were doing this, we realized that there's many companies, both public and private, including companies such as Rogers, Enbridge, many other private transport companies that mandate the drivers undertake defensive driving and safety. And I think it's important to mention this as these companies have seen the importance of driver safety. Yet none of these drivers are transporting human beings. And yet the importance of their driving abilities at the forefront for these organizations. I do realize that the undertaking of thousands of drivers, training thousands and thousands of drivers is a really big undertaking. However, I think our city has the opportunity now to show our community, particularly after the last 18 months, that health and safety is a priority that we can give to Torontonians. And it can just give them some comfort that when they call for a taxi or an Uber or a limo, whichever service they choose, that they can be aware that the driver's been trained, not only on customer service and accessibilities, but also on their driving abilities, been assessed. And they've been given extra tools for driving in an urban setting. And a lot of the students that I've spoken to, there's a real sense of pride when they're issued not only a driver for hire license, but that their career choice is backed up with access to proper training so that it can give not only the public a sense of security, but we also give drivers knowledge and ability to enrich their work experience and their choice of the career that they've chosen to do. But I think the City of Toronto has an opportunity now to be at the forefront of making communities feel safe and secure when they're choosing, particularly after the last year we've had, choosing to call a vehicle for hire to transport them. I'm more than happy to answer questions about the training in more detail and share stuff with the committee. Thank you for having me.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions of the deputant? Seeing none, Ms. Erickson, thank you very much for your time this morning and all the work that you're doing at Centennial College.
Thank you so much.
Next, I have Sam Moyney. Sam Moyney. My apologies if I'm mispronouncing your surname. You have 5 minutes.
No worries. Thank you, Councillor. First of all, thank you, Councillor Lindsay, for putting this forward. My name is Sam Moyney. I'm part of the taxi industry for quite a few years now. I've been an advocate for the last 8. I would like to come here and speak to the motion that's up for us today. And I want to thank Councillor Wongtown, Councillor Ford, and Councillor Lindsay on working on this very diligently. For us as the taxi industry, we always welcome training for newcomers coming into our industry. We feel that any business or especially people who are moving people around, our most vulnerable people, and making sure that the community has vehicles that are working in an aspect of making sure that whoever is driving behind that vehicle is properly trained and not just for themselves, but for the safety of the public, the cyclists, other drivers, pedestrians. We've seen a lot of unfortunate incidents in our city in the last few months and the last few years that I think were very preventable. And this is one of the most easiest way of handling it, as one of them is training our drivers that are on the road most of the time, picking up passengers on a daily basis. Just a few things I'd like to say is that when it comes to training our PTC, our vehicle for hire drivers, we do have drivers that have been trained by the city prior to PTCs being legalized in the city of Toronto. They did have diligent courses, 1 month city-run courses, and some ambassadors, especially having to do 3-month courses that were run by the city, and also having to write examinations for them as well. So I would hope that any training that comes to play I would hope that the people who did who have gone through those courses will be exempt from taking that training, and because they have taken an extensive course, and and if there is a refresher course that comes up later on, I welcome that, as they had in the past. The city ran refresher courses every 3 or 4 years that every driver had to take, but to take a from scratch course, I think is unnecessary for them. But of course, people who are newcomers to our industry, whether they be PTC drivers or taxi drivers, any vehicle for hire driver, they must have some basic training, as does any industry really. But as you're driving a vehicle, moving around passengers, for safety of the public and themselves, I think it's an absolute necessity, and it's long overdue. And we've been down this road before, and we're hoping that today this will really emphasize the need for training in our city, and sends a strong signal to city staff that we have to follow our bylaws. In the sense of what happened in the last since COVID has hit, we've seen an additional 16. I believe they told us 16,000 additional drivers being added to PTC companies, and only about 120 to 200 licensed taxi drivers being issued licenses. And I think since COVID hit, if it's in regards to people's well-being and their ability to make a living wage, adding additional drivers to already scarce industry, especially when COVID hit, with nobody on the streets, really was an unnecessary step. And having them untrained and issuing them a license was actually even more mind-boggling to me. But it is what it is, and we are hoping, and I am hoping, that they would stop issuing licenses today until the training is in place. There's no need for additional drivers as there are. I think there's over 50,000 PTC drivers, and a lot of vehicle for hire drivers as well. And I don't think it's necessary that we add any additional drivers until the training is in place, until the system is organized, and making sure that the public is safe. There's no need to add additional drivers when we have more than enough as there is on the streets right now. And you don't want to be adding additional drivers that are untrained to our cities when there's already more than enough people out there already as there is. And I can say for taxi drivers, majority of them, not the newcomers obviously, but a lot of taxi drivers, have had significant training and experience over the years driving. There's some drivers that have been driving for 30, 20, 40 years, and they're more than capable of handling the load until this training is put in place. So, the two things that I take away from this is, we support the training for any newcomers that are coming into our industry who haven't had training before, but the taxi drivers who have had the month-long course that they've already taken, and many of them have actually taken 3-month courses to get their licenses. I don't think it's necessary for them as they say, the originals, the original people, to make sure that they get exempted from scratch examining or training. But if there's a refresher training that comes in play later, we support that, and also stop issuing licenses until the training is put in place and there is proper adequate training for the newcomers to come in and take. So those are the 2 points I'd like to make. And again, thank you for everybody for taking the time.
Thank you, Ms. Roy. I appreciate your time and insights this morning. Are there any questions of the deputant? Seeing none, thank you very much, Mr. Moynihan.
Thank you.
Our next deputant is Erla Phillips from Rideshare. Ms. Phillips, are you on the line?
Yes, I am.
You have 5 minutes whenever you're ready.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair and councillors, for giving me this opportunity. I've been a ride-hail driver for more than 6 years in the city of Toronto, and I've driven on the 3 major ride-hail platforms. I'm here to speak to the importance of meaningful, comprehensive driver training, and to urge you not to continue to license new drivers until you can verify that the training we need is being delivered in accordance with our existing bylaws. Ride-hailing drivers become commercial vehicle operators as soon as we turn on that app. In many jurisdictions across Canada, ride-hail drivers are required to get a commercial license to operate. Here, we only have the city license trails to keep everyone safe. I took the full taxi course at a licensed, accredited institution right here in Toronto. And I used those skills and the knowledge that I learned every single day. It's not fair to have drivers out on the roads without these kinds of skills. You know, this presents risk. For example, increased amount of accidents, conflict with the public, lawsuits, and they're less likely to succeed. On the other hand, as a passenger, which I am occasionally, I've seen countless violations, road violations, sensitivity, inappropriate behavior. We need to ensure that these trainings are put in place and delivered effectively. As an example, Uber does offer sexual harassment prevention training, but it's based on US law and attitudes, and it's very easy to click through quickly without paying attention to the content. I still get passengers multiple times a week who tell me that they're relieved, they feel safer when they see that I'm a woman. That is very telling. I believe that we need to pause licensing until the bylaws are affected. There was no need from a service point of view to license new drivers in violation of the bylaw. As the city's own research reveals, business levels plummeted during the pandemic and are still depressed, although rising. If the city has the best interests of drivers and the public in mind, there is also no need to continue licensing in violation. There's still not enough business to support the already licensed drivers. Given overhead costs and the fact that cruising is unpaid, drivers often lost money during the pandemic. And bringing more than 4,000 new drivers during this period into this situation has not helped them at all. In 2019, there were over 80,000 ride-hail drivers licensed in Toronto. That is more than New York City. They have 3.5 approximately times the population and approximately 5 times the amount of business. This should have been enough. The only explanation is unheard of levels of turnover, but that turnover is not the city's problem. And violating the bylaw shouldn't happen to make up for companies' retention problems. I hope that the city will consider moving forward with the training and halting new driver licensing until drivers receive the necessary training to protect all of our members of the public. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Phillips. Does anybody have any questions of the deputant? Saying none, thank you very much for your time and your insights this morning. Our next deputant is Gurjeet Dillon from Toronto Taxi. Mr. Dillon, are you on the line?
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you, Chair and members of committee, for the opportunity to speak before you. My name is Gurjeet Dillon. I represent Scarborough City Cab and Toronto One Taxi. We've been providing taxi cab services in the city since 1994. I can share firsthand the difference that training makes. Based on our experience, we strongly believe that there should not be any delay or further relaxing of training requirements for vehicle for hire drivers. Further, there should be a pause on additional licenses being issued until and unless training is available. There are many components that go into the making of a good vehicle for hire driver. Taking passengers from point A to point B is not the same as having friends or family in your vehicle. Going through training to better equip for handling paying riders creates a higher sense of confidence and builds skills that are necessary for ensuring safety for everyone. As per the staff report, new training requirement aims to improve driver awareness and enhance public safety. And we fully agree with the staff's assessment of this. As a company, we believe strongly in the benefits of proper training for every new driver and annual refreshers for even the most experienced drivers. There is simply no way we would put an operator behind the wheel without proper training, no matter how many years they've been driving. The risks to our riders and to our company are just too high to overlook. It has become near impossible for taxi operators to get commercial insurance, as most insurance brokers are not willing to take on the risk. Demonstrating a robust training programs is instrumental in being considered for insurance coverage. To see the city license tens of thousands of vehicles for hire drivers without training is mind-boggling when we consider it. The primary focus of our training program is always safety. Our company works in several municipalities. Training is paramount for every municipality and for good reason. To highlight the types of circumstances that drivers can be faced with, I would like to share an incident which occurred many years ago but has left a lasting impact on that municipality and how it operates. It involves a driver transporting a passenger with special needs. The driver went over a speed bump too quickly and heard the passenger make a sound, but he thought he would check once they arrive at the destination, which happened to be nearby. Unfortunately, by the time they arrived, the passenger had died from the impact of the speed bump, as it had shifted the passenger's head down, constricting his airways, and the passenger was unable to lift his neck. The coroner's inquiry noted that had the driver stopped and called 911, the nearest fire station was very close and the passenger may have been saved. This incident led to major changes in the training program and protocol for contacting emergency services. This unfortunate situation shows the role well-trained drivers and strong policies can play in saving someone's life. It's also important to note that training requirements do not apply only to vehicles that provide specialized services for people with disabilities. There are many individuals who have special needs, which can include physical disabilities, but also cognitive disabilities. And these individuals may not qualify for accessible transit, or they may choose to take public transit and vehicles for hire in order to have more flexibility. Training for each and every driver who may serve the public is essential. We have gone from having mandatory CPR first aid certificates for taxi drivers to no training at all for new vehicle for hire drivers in the city of Toronto at this time. As a company serving the public, training and safety has always been paramount and will continue to be. Based on what we know about the requirements of the service and our real world experiences, we want to express a sense of urgency in ensuring that each and every vehicle for hire driver is trained. There should be a pause on licensing until we can follow the bylaw. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Dillon. Does anybody have any questions of the deputy? Seeing none, thank you, Ms. Dillon. We appreciate your time and your insights this morning. Next is Mr. Kurt Halfyard from Ride Hail. Mr. Halfyard, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me clearly?
I can. You have 5 minutes whenever you're ready.
Wonderful. Thank you. Good morning, councillors. My name is Kurt Halfyard, and I've been a ride hail driver since 2017 with Lyft and Uber in the GTA. And I understand, and the reason for me speaking here today is that the city is far behind in its compliance around its own bylaw of requiring driver training before allowing drivers issuing still issuing PTC licenses, and I certainly want to echo Sam and Erla's thoughts that this should stop until you get your act together with the training course. I have no idea where that course is in terms of request for proposal or in terms of actual implementation, but at the very least, it seems unwise, if safety is the priority, to still be issuing new PTC licenses for whether it be for cabs or for ride hail. And in terms of the training itself, I am a big believer in the sort of Swiss cheese model of safety, where there's many components on that, and training is clearly one of them. But the training execution needs to be very thoughtful and have teeth in terms of testing and pass-fail for issuing licenses. I heard from the 2015 standards that this was in fact the case, and that there was a certain level of in testing and whatnot. And I would hate to see whatever passes or goes forward to be just a rubber stamp sort of online course without any actual testing. And you know, if it is just something like that, there will be some marginal gain, but it will be low. I feel the city's efforts would be even more effective if it adopted more passive strategies along with the training, analogous to the Vision Zero philosophy. I don't know if you're familiar with the Japanese mistake-proofing concept of poka-yoke, where you kind of fix the problems themselves without needing training, or at least to go in conjunction with training. And I hope I can take a few minutes of your time to kind of outlay a proposal that I would feel have serious effect on improving safety, because that, I believe, is the goal of these policies. If PTC licenses were issued based on the criteria of living in the Greater Toronto Area with a G license and postal code that could prove that you lived in the area and you've experienced winter here, you've experienced, you know where the airport is, which was one of the onus for this discussion in the first place, was a driver didn't know the area. This would ensure that drivers had a certain sense of geography of the city, and they would know where things are and how to drive in the city. By doing this passively, obviously in conjunction with your training, on the bureaucratic side, I think this would be able to do quickly. It would be able to be implemented cheaply, and I honestly, I think it would be more effective. I think it would weed out poorly experienced drivers from even getting into the business of transporting people. I want to be clear that this in no way would impact, as I understand it, delivery. So it's not actually impacting people's ability to make money. It would just take the higher quality level of drivers and put them into the people moving business rather than the goods, packages, and food moving business. It would also shrink the driver pool, which frankly is obnoxiously large for the level of business that's in the city, even as we continue to come out of COVID. There's no reason that there needs to be this many people licensed, and I assume it costs time and money to issue these licenses, so there's no reason to further strain city resources on this. I mean, to sum up, if the goal is safety, training is obviously a piece, and the way it's implemented is absolutely critical to making sure that that piece is effective. But just having an appreciation for geography and the amount of time people have spent in the city would do a lot more, and it's within your power to do it. Thanks again for the time, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Deputy Mayor Holliday, you have questions of the deputy?
I did. Mr. Hapyard, thank you for speaking to us. You raised an interesting concept in there. It was just about, you know, the notion that some drivers move people and some drivers move goods. And, you know, I think that's really taken off on many levels, but the stuff that sticks in my mind are the people that deliver food now. There seems to be a lot more of it. from what you see out there, do you think there is some value in taking a look at that sub-industry as well? And I'm not proposing we do that here today, but I'd love to hear what you have to say about it because you're out there.
Well, personally, I don't think anyone's licensing pizza drivers, and they've been doing that for ever. So I agree that, you know, the province has a mandate to ensure people get their driver's license properly in the context of the province. So that's already covered. A lot of the safety things, and I am hugely appreciative of the fact that of what Sam and Erla said, that, you know, and the other speaker as well, that picking up people is different than driving your friends around or even slinging pizza but I don't know if the city issues PTC licenses for package and food delivery. I don't know if that's necessary. And I mean, there's some concern that if you stop letting people drive people around, that their livelihood will be threatened. But there's so many options. COVID has opened up things so much that I do believe that, you know, if you want to, let's say, suboptimal or less trained driver, you know, the pizza's not going to care if it's smashed into the back of the seat from hard braking.
Yeah, but maybe I would say I care about people's behavior on the street. So with that, I just, because you know these industries better than I could possibly. Is there a difference though now, you know, back in the day, the pizza driver worked for the pizza company and there was some insurance and some oversight, but now we're in a different world where, you know, drivers may be individuals and individual businesses. And, you know, that level of oversight might be different.
Well,
and there sure is a lot of them. I just curious on your thoughts.
To be frank, Councillor Holiday, I think that the delivery and insurance and all of that is a garbage fire. I certainly know that Uber and Lyft, for the very tiny amounts of things that they put onto drivers to be better drivers, and it is really minimal. It's even less for that side of the business, and you know, it's less in terms of car age, it's less in terms of you know, onus and safety and whatnot. So I agree, there's definitely a component that you want every driver on the city to be safe, and so do I. However, I think you would also agree with me that the bar should be slightly higher if there's a person sitting in the back, and you know, to have these services function, whether it be cabs or gig economy ride hail services, passengers have to have the confidence that there's a certain level of quality. And again, to toot my own idea here of a 3-year mandate of living in the city and having the driver's license issued and controlled at your end, which you have power to do, that would weed out a lot of the things. And I think it would make people more confident to know that the person has lived in their city that's driving them around.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, on a point of order. I just realized that I have a declared conflict with this item due to that one of my family members has a taxi license. So I have already sent the declaration form to the clerk, and I won't be voting on this item.
Okay, thank you. And if you could turn off your
Yes,
video, please. Perfect.
Yes.
Thank you. Are there any further questions of the deputant on this? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Huffyard. Appreciate your time and input this morning. Our next deputant is Mr. Albert Cole from the Toronto Community Bikeways Coalition. Mr. Cole, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you very much. Yeah, my name is Albert Cole. I'm from the Toronto Community Bikeways Coalition. We're a group that's made up of people with backgrounds in healthcare, law, arts, and social justice. I want to, first of all, or we want to support this motion by Councillor Wong Tam. We want to commend to you the written submissions by Ride Fair, and we also want to share our own experience with Uber and Lyft. So Ride Fair points out, and we agree, that one of the key roles of municipal government is to set out the rules and expectations for our public spaces. Well, one of those public spaces, designated public spaces for the safety of residents who get around by bicycle, are bike lanes. And in fact, we know more so now during the pandemic that essential workers use those bike lanes to get to work, but they also use those bike lanes to deliver food. And that delivery is often done at night or in difficult conditions. Now, in terms of road safety, our own experience, our own work on this, we've written proposals to City Hall about how to make improvements about Uber and Lyft. We've created a virtual bike lane around a parked car in the bike lane to try to educate drivers about the safety issues. We've met with police to urge them to increase enforcement, especially after 6 p.m. when parking enforcement officers go home, at least the ones that patrol the bike lanes. We've met with Uber, and their response was quite interesting. They said, well, you can complain about the driver, but of course that complaint process only applies to the passengers, who of course have an interest in being dropped off in the most convenient spot. We've counted the many infractions, and in fact, I've even dressed up as the Santa Claus at Christmas time to hand out lumps of coal to drivers parked in the bike lane. But ultimately, this battle, on the ground between road safety advocates or community advocates and drivers is misplaced, because we know that the corporate higher-ups are the ones that can really change this situation. But as it is now, our experience in the bike lanes is that Uber and Lyft simply thumb their noses at you, at City Hall, at the public, and of course at the law and our safety. By simply, and of course what Uber and Lyft do is they simply download the obligation to respect the law to drivers who are motivated by customers' desire for convenience. Sadly, we know how this will turn out. We've seen plenty of examples of this. City Hall will take urgent action when someone on a bike skirts around an illegally parked driver in the bike lane, and that person on a bike is seriously injured or killed. I'm a coordinator of the Avenue Road Safety Coalition. We worked for 4 years to try to get changes to Avenue Road to make it safer. When we finally got concerted attention from City Hall, it was only after a young man aged 18 was recently killed on Avenue Road. We don't want City Hall to act out of grief. We want City Hall to act out of an enlightened position, out of a planned position. And so we certainly support the motion, and we certainly support the calls to stop licensing new drivers until training resumes. So subject to any questions, thank you for your time, and thank you for your interest in this issue.
Deputy Mayor Holliday, questions of the deputy?
It is. Thank you for speaking to us today, Mr. Cole. And you and your organization would have a little bit of a unique view of this, and you brought it up yourself, just about vehicles that stop in bike lanes. The previous speaker, I don't know if you caught it because your audio settings would be different than mine, but I asked the gentleman that spoke before us, before you, what he thought, because he brought it up, because about goods transportation. I think you mentioned food delivery, but that's kind of an aspect of the new economy, right? You've got people out there moving stuff around. And I broached the subject, should we take a look at them? We deal with rideshare that are moving with people right now, but is that element worth something looking at as well? And I would appreciate your insight on that, because I guess a food delivery vehicle is also one that's likely to be stopped in a bike lane.
Yeah, well, yeah, I did listen to that exchange and certainly defer to the expertise of our ride fare. But what I would comment is the delivery that's going on right now by bicycle is far less obtrusive or intrusive rather than by motor vehicles. And since the city has a policy of transformed TO where they're trying to get people out of cars and do short distance trips by bicycle and by walking, so my question would be, why not regulate in the central city to ensure that, for example, 16-ounce burgers are not being transported in 2,000-pound cars, but instead are being transported by individuals on bicycles? That's far more consistent with the city's climate emergency policy, with a transformed TO and other policies on trying to get people out of cars.
Thank you. Thank you for the answer and a very interesting prospect.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions of the deputant? Seeing none, Cole, thank you for your time and insights this morning. Very much appreciated.
Thank you.
Our next deputant is Abdul Qadir Mohammed from Co-op Cabs.
Mr. Chair, pardon me, I can advise that that speaker actually withdrew.
Okay, all right.
To the next speaker.
Our next speaker, our last registered speaker is Mr. Mohammed Riza Husainanen.
Mr. Chair, I'm advised that Mohammed is not yet present, but I will advise as well that there is an additional registrant following Mohammed, Brendan.
Thank you. I just refreshed my page. So our last deputant is Mr. Brendan Agnew-Eiler. Mr. Agnew-Eiler, are you there? Brendan Agnew-Eiler? Calling again for Brendan Agnew-Eiler. Nope. Okay, so not seeing him, so we're going to take this into committee for questions of staff on this item. Questions of staff? I don't know if there's any outside councillors. I don't believe there are. Seeing none, so members of the committee, questions of staff? Speaker Nunziata?
Okay, I guess my one question is, in July of 2019, we did adopt the mandatory training requirements. And I understand with the pandemic that there's been a delay. So my question would be is, why have we issued new licenses when we haven't been able to deliver the mandatory training?
So thank you for the question. So it's important that I note that we did issue a call for third parties so we could have certified trainers in the beginning of January 2020. That was halted as a result of the pandemic, and it's something that we need to reissue because things have changed significantly with respect to in-class, in-car, online. Training has changed as everything else has in our world. As a result, it is a requirement that we don't have certified trainers to send groups to. I believe it would be a council decision if you would like to stop the licensing. It's not something that I can do.
From council to stop the licensing. That's part of this motion that we have before us. Otherwise, you would still continue issuing licenses, correct?
Again, I believe it's council's decision and council's authority to, if they want to hold or suspend the stop licensing new drivers. That would be a decision of council, and we would follow the decision of council.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Mayor Holiday, questions of staff?
Thank you, Chair. Through to staff, what would the impact be of stopping licensing new drivers?
So we receive data from private transportation companies, Lyft and Uber, but we do not receive data from taxi companies other than one brokerage. So I can only speak to the private transportation side of it, whereby timing to hail a ride has doubled. There are less people driving. There were 100,000 PTC drivers at one time, and now it's down to, I believe, 46,000. So there are less people on the road, which is good from a congestion point of view, but it could have an impact on employment of those people looking for precarious employment during difficult times, and impact on consumers looking to get around with wait time.
That you are not able to stop issuing licenses, that it would be a council decision. The wording of the motion is a bit odd. It says the council requests that you think about it, consider it. Maybe my question's to clerks, if it's even in order to ask you to think about something that you can't do. I mean, what's the impact of that? Maybe I should direct it at the clerk instead.
Mayor Holiday,
Mr.
you asking
Grant.
a point of order, or are you questioning staff?
No, I guess that's a good point, Mr. Chair. I mean, I think I heard from staff that it would be a direct decision of council. So maybe towards the end of my questions, I would raise that as a point of order. But may I ask of staff, from a practical standpoint, how far away is the implementation of training to the level that is expected by the bylaw?
So that's a great question and a very important question. This is not quick. This is not cheap, as some of the deputies referred to it as. We need to find certified trainers, and we would assess them using an expert panel that we do with people from fleet, transportation, and other areas. So we have to reissue the call, and then we have to assess it. And then these companies, if chosen, then they would need to invest and develop their programs. These programs aren't at all times sitting on the shelf ready to be delivered. They have to be developed. So people are saying we would like to deliver this, and if accepted, there's going to need some time for them to build their programs, to invest in simulators, to invest in online technology, to invest in classrooms, to invest in vehicles. There's many things that they would need to invest in. It's difficult for me to put a time frame on it, but it is something we are absolutely committed to. This is coming back here in November and then on to council, and we will be reissuing it immediately after that. Okay, so there's a report due imminently on this from you, because I noticed that this is a letter from the councillor. It's not necessarily wrapped up in this type of commentary from staff. So are we going to hear more about this in a month? It'll be about the entire industry, Councillor Deputy Mayor Holiday, not just the training piece. It's moving forward on outstanding request for us to report back. But I think it's important that we get direction from council on the entire industry, and with this particular area, we're looking for your direction.
Okay, and so with the information in that report, would council be able to have a better understanding of the implication if it was to do something like direct you to stop issuing vehicle for hire licenses? You know, I don't know, let's say it's going to take many, many months before a training program comes in. We would at least have a better understanding of what the impact on the industry and service to citizens would be.
Thank you for the question. That's something that we could build into our report within the next month to try to understand what some of those nuances would be and impacts, as you say.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. If I may raise that point of order, because the staff pointed that out, that it would have to be a directive from council. Okay. I just want to confirm whether or not that motion is in order.
Mr. Chair, I've been advised by someone who's on the call, Corey Lynch. He's welcome to speak up if he'd like here, but I think the answer to the councillor's question is that it is in order to ask staff to consider. You know, you know, council's asked. You know, it was an order of council. It's here has been referred to by council, and it's you know, it's asking staff to do something to consider.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions of staff on this item? Seeing none, speakers? I saw Speaker Nunziata first, followed by Councillor Matlow, and then Deputy Mayor Holiday.
Sorry, Chair Ainsley, it's Councillor Wong-Tam. I don't have my video on, but I'm hoping to speak very quickly.
Sorry, Councillor Wong-Tam.
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you to the members of the committee and to the deputies who came out today. This issue is before you largely because of inaction from city staff. You will all recall that in the year 2018, we experienced a horrific and unfortunate death of Nicholas Cameron, a young man who was hailing an Uber vehicle. He and his friend stepped into this vehicle, and inadvertently, the driver was not well trained, did not seem to know the rules of the road, and he was killed. The driver himself was received minimal sentencing at best, suspension. But the loss of this life, I think, would we could all agree profoundly change the way we were looking at the industry. And this is after the fact that City Council was moving away from regulations and moving away from safety training. And I think it was a sobering moment in time for all of us when Mr. Cameron lost his life so early. In 2019, City Council had a change of heart, and we said that we were going to reinstate the driver training. We were going to prioritize road safety. This was also at the same time we were spending a lot of energy and time and money trying to reinforce the concepts of road safety and Vision Zero. So Council's direction was really clear by that time, a year later after Cameron's death, is that we were going to reverse course. So it's rather surprising that, almost 2 years out, we have not been able to establish the driver training that City Council said had to be put back into place. And so, the issue for us is really, not to belabor the point, but consumer safety and public safety is at risk. Council has taken a very clear position that we were not going to be wavering on this, and I'm hoping that this committee shows the strong leadership, which I believe is here, that you will step forward and tell staff to get this done. We cannot put more drivers on the road that are unsafe, that are not properly trained in passenger pickup and drop off in the safety of the road. I think we can all recognize that the city roads are getting more and more dangerous and not safer, not necessarily because of the fact that there are more cyclists and pedestrians on the road, but rather the fact that there's more vehicles. And when road violence takes place, the persons that will generally be seriously injured and potentially, face death are oftentimes the vulnerable road users. And that includes the seniors, those who are not driving a vehicle, those who are moving through the city through active transportation means. And I think that we have our obligation and duty to make sure that we keep them safe. One thing that everyone should be aware of is that there's an $8 million lawsuit that has been filed against the city for the loss of life, largely because the claim is that City Council should have done more to keep passengers, users of Lyft and Uber safe. And the claim is that we failed to do that. So I want to make sure that we don't fail anyone any further. I think that we have spoken really clearly in 2019, and that was a proud moment for all of us at Council when we stood up and said, let's get back into the game of ensuring, into the business of ensuring road safety. And I would hate to think that there was any move to defer that or delay that, despite the fact that there's already a 2-year delay. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Wong-Tam. We're going to take it back into committee. I saw Speaker Nunziata, followed by Councillor Holiday, followed by Deputy Mayor Holiday.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I'll be brief. I will be moving the recommendations. Unfortunately, with the pandemic, and as it was indicated by the deputants as well, that we did move this in 2019, and unfortunately with the pandemic, a lot of it has been delayed, and most of the staffing that we had went, towards the COVID issues, and so most of the resources went there, and I understand that. So, and I'm not blaming staff for that, but I think at this point, in light of that we should be, not issuing any further licenses until we put the training in place. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker Nunziata. Councillor Matlow.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I want to thank Councillor Wong-Tam for her leadership on this. She has been absolutely resolved to see this through council, and she, even the unlikely duo with her and Councillor Ford, really demonstrated her commitment to working with council, working with staff, working with stakeholders to arrive at where we are today. And I agree with her that there should be no delay. We, over the past year and a half, I think all of us have been talking a lot about safety. And, there's so many areas of our society where, we don't need, whether it be government or regulations or rules to start sort of coming out all over the place. But I think there is a general acceptance that when it comes to health and safety, there needs to be safeguards. We wouldn't want somebody driving a huge machine on our roads who didn't have a license, for example. And in this profession, if you're driving a car, whether it be a vehicle for hire or taxi driver, we all want to know that it's somebody who has sufficient training to be able to do the job that they're doing and do it well and do it safely. So, the first item here is asking staff to consider, I think, a very reasonable request that there shouldn't be any new people coming onto the job that don't have that reasonable safety training to be able to do the job well. It doesn't speak to, by the way, and this is interesting, it doesn't speak to entirely, it's not overly prescriptive about whether or not, somebody, let's say, who, because a deputy spoke to this earlier, if they've already been trained, perhaps they should only have a refresher. That's something that staff can put together as part of what the certification looks like. But it does insist that staff consider, pausing, having new people come on who won't have the sufficient and adequate training to be able to do it safely. And then moreover, the delays that we've seen since the tragedy are just unacceptable. And so I really appreciate Councillor Wong-Tam, insisting that we move forward. And I really appreciate Councillor Nunziata's willingness to move the recommendations today. And I hope that there's unanimous support. And lastly, Councillor Holiday, through you, Mr. Chair, to the point about sort of the word consider, it recognizes that we can't prescribe staff to do something that we can't tell them to do. But I think it does indicate council's intention that this be seriously considered because of the concern that somebody might be driving without that training that we expect. So I think it hits the right mark, and I appreciate Councillor Wong-Tam's leadership once again.
Thank you, Councillor Matlow. Deputy Mayor Holiday.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before I begin, is just check with the clerk to see if there was time to get my motion and get that processed and ready.
Give me a thumbs up. Excellent.
If you could just display it. My motion is simple. It's a referral to have this considered in the report next month in November. And the reason I raise that is, look, the speakers today made a great point. This training is missing. I'm concerned about that. As a member of council, I believe I supported this package that included these ideas in it, and like to see that program put in place. What I don't understand is what the implication is if there was a pause in licensing for the city. And by the sounds of it, it could be a very long time before the training program is put in place. That's just based on the couple of moments I've had here to ask a couple of questions of staff on it. And I just want to have the benefit of a report before me before we would take such a step as council to make a decision like that, because it could have very significant implications for people everywhere. And it's not meant to take away from this idea that, we could exercise that direction if we had to, or take away from the idea that we would need to get this information before us, nor take away from the larger issue of where is the training program. I just think there's some legitimate questions that need to be asked and some details that need to be understood. Like the one thing Mr. Grant said was it went from 100,000 drivers down to 40-something thousand. And if I don't know what the renewal or refresh rate is, or at what rate new drivers are introduced, I just don't know. And if we don't know that, I don't know how we can make this decision, because what happens if the number of eligible drivers depletes even further? Do we have enough drivers to do what is needed in the city? I don't know. So I'd like that information before me before I make a decision. Hence the purpose of the referral. I think it gives us about a month, and we'd have better information before us to make a decision. Thank you. And sorry, Mr. Chair, in the absence of that, if it doesn't pass, I would like to not vote for recommendation number 1, but I would vote for recommendation number 2 if I could have the vote split out.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Councillor Matlow, do you have a point of order?
Am I able to speak to the deferral?
Yes.
I encourage all of us not to support Councillor Holliday's deferral. I understand that, a request for more information is, it sounds like a very reasonable request. And I know that's Councillor Holliday's intentions. But if you actually read the motion, even that word that Councillor Holliday took umbrage with, the word consider, if we're not willing to move forward, given the safety concerns that Councillor Wong-Tam has raised, with even asking staff to consider something, what does that say about our commitment to safety? Again, if we are willing to delay, simply asking staff to consider something, what does that say about our commitment to safety? Do we really believe that it shouldn't be considered to ensure that any person driving a vehicle for hire, whether it be an Uber or Lyft or a taxi, shouldn't have sufficient and adequate safety training to be able to do the job well and safely on our roads for their passengers or for the people sharing the road with them? I just think that's unreasonable. So please, at the very least, I mean, honestly, if we really have a problem with the word consider, I wouldn't even have a problem just removing the word consider and just directing them. But I don't think we're ready to go there, perhaps as a council. So at the very least, let's indicate to staff that that's where we want to go. And then Councillor Holliday and all of us will have more information to decide based on what staff tell us whether or not we want to execute that. But if we delay, we will send the opposite signal, which is that we're not willing to make even the minimum effort to ensure the safety of the residents of Toronto. And I know that's not our intention. I know that's not Councillor Holliday's intention, but that's the way that it'll be seen, and quite rightly. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Matlow. And just before we speak, I seconded this notice of motion. I think the intent of it is quite clear. We have to ensure the safety of our roads, both for those driving motor vehicles, those in them, and those walking or riding on the streets around them. So I will be supporting and continue to support the recommendations in the notice of motion, and I will not be supporting referral, Deputy Mayor Holliday's referral motion. Thank you. So at this point, there are no other speakers. Matthews, we're voting on the referral first.
That is correct, Mr. Chair. On the referral, please.
Okay. All those in favor of the referral? And those opposed? The referral motion loses. And then Councillor Holliday on the recommendations before us asks for a recorded vote on recommendations 1 and 2. Can we take those together?
Yes, Mr. Chair. So this will be a recorded vote on just part 1 of the recommendations.
Okay. So that's all in favor of part 1 of the recommendation. Those in favor?
Chair Ainsley, Councillor Matlow, Speaker Nunziata, Councillor Fillion? All those opposed? And Councillor Holiday is opposed. Mr. Chair, that is 4-1, and that part 1 carries.
So that passes. Okay. And recorded vote on part 2. All in favor?
Chair Ainsley? Councillor Matlow? Speaker Nunziata? Councillor Fillion? And Deputy Mayor Holiday. Mr. Chair, that is 5 in favor and unanimous.
Okay,
thank you. Point of order, Mr. Chair. I don't know if it would be of benefit to Councillor Mantis, who has recused himself from this, if we ensured all the votes were recorded on for his record purposes. I don't have any reason to request a recorded vote on the first item, but I thought I'd bring that to your attention.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I believe that item passes, Matthew.
Yes, Mr. Chair, so both parts 1 and 2 carried. That is all there is to that item, and that is the last item. So I would mark it as the item is adopted.
Okay, that item is adopted. I believe that concludes our agenda for today. No bills, Matthew. Nothing else to vote on except adjournment.
That is correct.
All in favor? All in favor of adjournment. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to all the staff today, and I hope everybody continues to remain safe and well, and your families too. Thank you.